have always been very uneasy about economists stating that they are producing a theory in which they assume that people are rational utility maximizers. The two elements that I don't like, one is the idea that they're rational, and the other thing is what they're rational about, namely maximizing utility. And I don't know whether you in your writing use this phrase, but lots of economists do. And let's start with utility.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what it even means, because you can't put a little measure into a person's brain and read off utility. And Irving Fisher had the idea of this unit, utils, but
right.
We know there isn't such a unit.
Right.
Why can you talk about maximizing something that you can't measure?
All right, this is a good subject to start with, because I think we do disagree on this one, and so I think you hit the nail right on the head with a serious disagreement. I do believe that it's a useful, and that's all I would say, it's a useful way of looking at consumer behavior to assume that they're maximizing utility. Whether we want to call that rational or not, to me, is a secondary issue, but I do believe they are maximizing utility. It's not that I believe there's such a unit of utils that we can ever measure. To me, maximizing utility simply means the following, that consumers can order all the opportunities they have available to them, possible choices. They can order them, so they prefer some more than to others, so they can rank them. And that they have limited resources, they have limited incomes or wealth, time, whatever it may be, and that they attempt to choose that possibility, that combination of goods and so on, that is ranked the highest, consistent with their limited resources. Now, I think this is a testable theory. We can test it by various implications about how they would respond to prices, income, changes in wages, whole host of other patterns. It can become a very rich theory. I think it is becoming a very rich theory. It's not an empty theory, but it does not require the assumption that everybody has some kind of utils in their head that they're calibrating, and they can figure, this gives me 10 utils and fine. I think one can do away with utils entirely, but just ask where do they prefer. They want to get more rather than less. They want to do that in goods that they have a higher preferences for rather than others. And my claim would be, this isn't the best theory possible, but it's the best theory that we have. I don't know of any alternative that gives us the insight that this does.
You just said that one can get rid of it. Why don't we get rid of it and just study choices? People choose, and we can study what choices they make, and we can then discuss whether they're consistent or not, which is in some ways necessary for some of the tests. My guess would be that you find a lot of inconsistencies in consumer behavior.
Well, I think consistency is the test, that in fact one can show that the usual theory in terms of ranking and ordering, complete ordering of opportunities, is basically equivalent to a consistency test, that people behave consistently. Now, maybe there'd be a lot of inconsistencies, but let me sort of point out that there have been a few attempts to study the problem of consistency, not so much with individual household data, but with more group data, because one hasn't had the rich household data to do that, which is a limitation. But let's say if people looked at long-term English consumption patterns, American patterns, patterns of different groups, comparing different countries, and it's been very difficult to find dramatic, very common examples of inconsistent behavior in that type of data. I'm sure they'll show up more commonly in individual.
You know, a lot of work has been done showing that there are anomalies in individual behavior. I don't know about this well, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're right, in fact.
But it's mainly based on experimental evidence, not on actual choices. And I think you and I would agree that we don't necessarily have the same theory to predict how people behave in experimental situations as they would behave in market situations.